Okay, it's turn 51, and we've basically confirmed, yes, the Machakan-Ulm war is on, and Vanarus has picked a side. They have definitely decided to side against Ulm. That said, Ulm is lobbying me pretty heavily, and is saying that he's actually doing well against GC. I haven't been able to confirm that through anyone yet, but I'm going to try and get details on what's going on there. Without being too obvious about it. It's clear that Ulm has significant forces in situ, so we can see one over here. And I believe there are several others around this area here, and also forces engaged against Vanarus, who have placed Bandar Log itself, which was an Ulm stalwart under siege, which will be diminishing them somewhat, but we haven't seen any major battles yet. So I've got a couple of scouts over here. The reason we don't have much scout coverage is because we've started to pull as much as we can, as you can see, to cover Tianqi and give us intelligence there. But either way, this furball is on, and that's perfect. It does mean that the probable target will probably be Ulm's throne here, hoping that no fortress gets completed here in time. But we'll see. GC has, as we expected, requested our intervention, and we've said that we will reposition against Ulm, but we can't end our nap with them just yet because it would scare people into thinking we are throne rushing. Now, that's completely true. We are repositioning against Ulm, but the prospect of repositioning against Ulm will also explain, I hope, all of these movements up here. So if Relay is talking to GC, for example, and goes, oh, Nazca's moving all these troops up this way, what's going on? He'll be able to say, yeah, he's moving up towards the Ulmish border. So, which I technically am. I am moving closer to the Ulmish border. But, of course, some point before then, I will stop and take a right-hand turn. But for the now, I am doing exactly what I said. I'm moving against the Ulmish border. And I am concentrating some significant armies up near Ulm to be ready to move if required, or rather, when required, it looks like at this stage. If I was to summarize my turn before we go into the events list, it's very much, I'm very much now running on autopilot. I'm running according to the schedule I set myself a number of turns ago. I've made some small alterations here and there. Like I think there are some majors majors that I stayed behind. So these Koya were originally going to be advancing with their armies. Instead, I figured out I can have the time to have them stop, twice spawn, as long as I'm able to give them a pair of Boots of the Messengers. So I forged a few extras last turn, so I could twice spawn, so I could allocate them, and that would allow them to catch up and arrive here in Light Hills with their additional map mood at exactly the same time their army does. So they can get to here, their army will get to here, army will get to there, Koya can jump from there to there, I believe. The staging zone is having its lab built this turn. And the large Condor group is in stealth mode right now. It will be able to equip with additional gear and gems next turn, and then infiltrate formally into this area here and forward position. That'll be good because it'll also bring down supply usage in this province, which will help as we bring additional forces up. You can see we're moving our main armies up in this direction as expected. Everything else is sort of starting to bunker down. The exception is the Seraph, which is coming through, sweeping up a whole bunch of Condors from Eagle Reach Mountains, and then those Condors will disappear from sight, from everyone's sight, and will actually appear up here, which I don't think anyone will expect. I don't think anyone will expect that Condors that were here last turn will, by the time of our attack, end up over here. I'm hoping that that's enough of a strategic jump that people won't expect it. I'll go through the events list quickly, and then let's talk about where we're at in the game phase and what I'm thinking, because if anything, this is one of the most nerve-wracking stages of the game. After the first few turns, when you can ruin your entire game with one bad expansion, I'd argue this is the second scariest part of the game. So, huge block of lanterns from Ulm. This is part Ulm lobbying us to join. This is part Ulm saying that he's actually finished all the research he needs. I fully suspect Ulm has multiple level 9 researchers at this point. Like, we fed him to such a stupid degree that I fully expect he just has everything he needs and was willing to sell these. Now, I bought exactly this number because I calculated this is the number I will need, coupled with my mage movements and productions, to get exactly what I need in time for the earliest iteration of my plan. So this closes the gap. I did some algebra, worked it out, and there we are. I bought some lanterns from Ulm. Research and evocation is complete, so it's at 8. We're going to level 9 next. We will have level 9 in, I think, in 2 to 3 turns. We'll aim for 2. It might be 3. There's some confidence intervals in my planning depending on what I decide to move. We twice spawned those Koya that I talked about. Our first Lich, Arthur Wellesley, cast Lichcraft. So him and Eugene of Savoy are both casting Lichcraft this turn, which will give us 4 Liches. Those 4 Liches will then duplicate themselves again, and by that point we'll be more or less out of Death Gems, but we'll have 8 Immortals at that point, which is a solid base of units to hold this throne here. Keep going through the events list. Cloud Trapezing and Teleporting Royal Malki to be forward positioned as centerpoint mages for our various throne fortifications and pushes. So we'll see those when we actually launch the attacks. We cast Eyes of the Condors on the province where Tianqi is centralizing and patrolling with their large army. So obviously I can't scout here, not practically, but I need to keep eyes on this. And also this gives me a complete piece of intelligence on the army. It's entirely accurate. There are 438 units. There is an Immortal. It does radiate power. There is the Troll King. And I'm feeding this information directly to Shinu and Facia, who are using it to help inform their defensive planning. Also, it'll be important to give me last-minute targeting data for when I throw down spells. So, but we'll talk about that once we talk about planning, once we finish the events list. So yeah, Liches are coming in. We found 1 magic site. I think it was a 1-gem site. Nothing really important. Series of nothing battles against Urmor. So yep, we raid an Urmorian province. Urmor tried to just poke Relay, and Relay was there with their god. So whoops. AI Kalem attacked us. Yeah, lol. This is Urmor raiding with a very small efficient force. We had nothing there, so they took it. We did the same thing to them. Or we did the same thing to them. We did the same thing to them. This looks like Vanarus swarming Ulm and pushing them back. We pushed off. This is in the south now. I think this is in the south. Urmor leaving 1 ghoul behind. We beat that off. This is us anticipating a raid and killing it. Okay, so this is in the south. And we may as well stop at this point because I think it's the last battle. I know there are only 2 more. Tianqi attacked Urmor and defeated, so a failed raid. And we took the fortress at Ukrema, raised temple, lost 1 Sapphire, and then we're into random events. Okay, so in the south, Urmor has moved south, so we obviously threw him off the fortress at Kark. He's come south to Aiden, and we're just going to continue shadowing him while using that as an excuse to move forces down to secure this throne as we pipe more troops across from the west who will arrive just in time to assault this throne. So, but for now we're shadowing with this increasingly large force. It now has all of our major magical support, so it is nature enabled, so you'll see that's a Crystal Matrix boosted Enchantress, so the nature magic is there, the Fire 4 magic support is there, you've got Earth support there for the Army of Gold. So you've got Firestorm, Army of Gold, the nature buffs to protect from things like foul vapors. You've got some high death magic in attendance, and of course lots and lots of sacred units now. So we now have enough force to beat this if he decides to stay put, but I'm happy just to shadow it and have him take 1 province per turn and retake it behind him. Just keep him on the move and pinch off any forces that break off. So perfectly fine by me. Random events. Alquill, Lab, Sage, and 3 Astral Pearls. This is really good, but all of this is really mostly irrelevant to my plans at this point. 3 gems and minus 147 gold. Great. And then we lost a bunch of scouts, all of which were in Machaca, just walking around to try and see what's happening with the Ulmish War. But GC is good with patrols. He's characteristically good with patrols. So his fortresses and even some non-fort provinces are unsafe. Great. Okay. All of that is now said. Let's get into where we are with the plan. So I feel very much like if you read the testaments of people who were there in command in the early stages of World War I, the first few days, you'd think that there'd be a flurry of activity and decisions being made. The reality is, with an undertaking like this, all of the logistical planning is done beforehand, or at least I've done all the planning beforehand. And in World War I, they'd done all the railway timetabling beforehand. So when the call was made to go to war, people like the French really just it was a push button exercise. It was, initiate the mobilization plan. Everyone knew what that meant, and all the timetables ran from there. That's pretty much where we're at. I'm making very subtle adjustments to the timetable I set, but for the most part, everything is moving as intended. There are several thousand units on the run in something like 30 or 40 divisions, with a division being a commander with a significant body of troops, plus some supporting majors in some cases. But everything is at the moment where it needs to be, and nothing is getting in the way. There are two critical things that need to be done at this point. The first is that I need to start the shields up process. So the shields up process, as I did in the Atlantis game, is making sure that every throne is adequately protected by the time that I show my hand and people start counterattacking. So that means domes and iron walls and siege garrisons at the appropriate fortresses. Now the first one is getting it this turn. So the Dome of Flaming Death is going up this turn. Eventually an Astral Mage will arrive for Dome of Arcane Warding as well. There is going to be a pair of Earth Boots and a Bloodstone circulating relatively soon, which will get the Iron Walls going up one province at a time. And that will get lead us to a situation where we have 1250 wall integrity and we have domes. The domes will serve the role of knocking out teleport attacks. So if someone tries to cast a remote attack spell, they might die, the spell might bounce off in the case of Arcane Warding, and teleports with entire stacks, which is, to be honest, mostly a threat from Relay. Relay will absolutely be able to teleport stacks if they're at the appropriate level of research to do so. If not, they'll just teleport large numbers of astral thugs and try mind control shenanigans or something like that. Good chance they'll bounce off or incinerate, and that's good, because if people are teleporting in astral units that are intended to communion, if the wrong people die or bounce off the domes, the communion may arrive massively lopsided and kill itself, which is great. We're also starting to, you'll see, put supply items in our fortresses in increasing numbers and dispersing infantry around them. At the appropriate juncture, what will happen is these infantry will pull back into these fortresses with even more supply items and just bring the siege strength up even further. So there's 961 siege strength. That means that there is 480 odd siege defense, which means that people will need to bring an awful lot of siege attack in order to break these fortresses. So they need to bring 500 to start chipping away at the 1250 integrity. So a one-turn crack would need something like 1700 siege strength. That's a lot of gate cleavers. Let's leave it at that. But yeah, so we're moving to schedule, and we're starting to put the defenses up around the thrones. We're massing up the units that we will need to be in the appropriate locations. This one is probably the weakest, but it's also relatively insular. Another weak point is 245, which at the moment has only its Fire Mage component. It doesn't have the supporting Battlecasters, and it doesn't have a huge number of Hatun Runa because it's having supply problems. But we are, as you can see, bringing in large numbers of Hatun Runa. They will come in, they'll starve, that's okay, that's within my schedule. I'll then be able to supply them, and I'll get the morale back before they disease and die, if some reasons die, like, whatever. So that process is going on. That's concern one. Concern two is the absolute need to buy diplomatic time. So our little Maskirovka campaign has been to make sure that no one sees this coming before we're ready to go. That's a combination of stealthing our units, providing diplomatic cover for redeployments, killing scouts to deny actual information, and providing plausible counter-narratives. None of which are lies, but all of which are plausible counter-narratives as to why I might be doing the things I am doing. Keeping Kalem in this province. We could absolutely squish this province, but not only would that deny Machaka and Asphodel a mechanism to fight each other, it also would clue in Tianchi to the fact we're here. I don't know if there's a TC scout here. It's very unlikely because of the patrol strength in this province, but even if there is, successfully, it would only see slaves, and all of my provinces have large stacks of slaves. They won't see the combat power, which is the Condors and the Inca Mage. Everything else appears to be moving. Some of these provinces appear to be drawing down in strength in total, which will be encouraging to him. The reality is, of course, that you're starting to see some of the critical mages group up here. So here's a nature boost caster who's currently researching. That might get transferred to someone better because the better nature mages are shipping up from the Ermor front. Punchao here has got the Staff of Flame Focus, so Punchao will, at the right moment, be given fire boosters, and Kalem will become a missile silo of sorts to launch flames from the sky at the appropriate juncture. So my main campaigns at the moment in terms of information have been to tell everyone that I am worried about being perceived as throne rushing, which is true, establishing a proper narrative and casus belli for war with TC, which is of course aiding my allies, which was the plan before I decided this was a throne attack opportunity, and saying that I will position against Ulm to aid GC, which provides justification for positioning against the Ulmish throne, while also doing exactly what I said, providing support for GC if necessary. So for the moment, the train timetable runs apace. It's turn 51. I reckon by turn... my plans allow for, if I need to rush, I can attack on turn 53. If not, I can attack turn 54 or even 55. Like, the longer I wait in that plan, the more assets I'll have in position, but it comes down to how long can I maintain OPSEC. Because at this point, I'm still at the stage in the game where if everyone works it out right now, if Relay works it out right now, if Ys works it out right now... oh, by the way, Ys looks like they're engaging with Ulm, which is great. But anyway, if they work that out, so let's just say Shiniyama, Facia, Ys, Relay, Machaka, Ulm, they all turned around and said, mate, we know what you're doing. We all end our naps at this time. I'm still at the point where I can't rush out a win. I'm not past the point of no return in terms of preparations. Everything's actually quite disparate and disorganized. I'm not set up to fight a war right now, so it would be really messy and long term. So I need to buy myself a few more turns with diplomatic and political cover and stealth and counter-raiding Ermor and keeping all this going while killing as many scouts as possible to make sure that by the time my attack comes, it comes sooner than everyone expects. Everyone knows I'm big and scary and dangerous, but I just want them to just not notice long enough and to be busy with their own things so I can pull this off. So that's turn 51. I'll see you in turn 52. Okay, it is turn 52. Yeah, 52. And as quietly as possible, we are moving into position with just about everything we can. You'll notice we have a bunch of gems again, which we didn't last turn, and that's because we once again cast Wish. This time we wish for gems. That gives you 25 of every gem type other than Blood Slaves. Obviously, it costs 100 to cast Wish, so there's a 75 profit margin in there, which we've just managed to capture. We'll wait for our Astral Pearls to build back up again. You cut down the economy if you alchemize, and I have uses for all of these gem types, as you'll see. We also got an extra Naiad. My intention is to transform that Naiad in case I need to fly someone out who has additional nature support, but it's always handy to have multiple Naiads. They're just good casters for someone like me that doesn't have reliable access to this water-nature combo at these levels. We're sneaking one back to Nazca again in case we need it, and then we're forging a cornucopia in place. We also put up a dome in Jebro, so Jebro is now Dome of Flaming Death, which we talked about, and Rod here, having done his job, who is now holding a Staff of Flame Focus and the requisite 2 fire boosters and a Shade Mail Haubergeon to keep him stealthy and invisible to everyone who's watching, so no one's asking why he's here. He's sneaking up to 275, which will be his forward position to target Moss Woods. Now he'll have range from there over huge swaths of Chen-Chi, and he'll also have range on Red Waste. And when we go, we may actually hit Ermor's stack just as a precautionary measure. Haven't decided on a final task list. I'm just focused on building up my fire gems as quickly as possible. So we got 25 from Wish. We're making 45 a month. We're going to stock these up as much as we can and just throw evocations everywhere to mess everyone up as much as we can when we finally move. Double Lichcraft, which you'll see down here. So we now have 4 Liches. All 4 of our Liches are now casting Lichcraft, which will get us to 80. Sorry, to 8 Liches, not 80 Liches. We're still at 95 Death Gems with 40 per turn, so we can keep this up a little while longer. We'll start splitting them up. This will give us a very good core of Immortals, and 5 Death is nothing to sneeze at. Like, that's a good, useful caster. The chassis is okay. It's Immortal, obviously, is one of the big draws. So if this becomes a lasting thing, yeah, we'll go with it. I'm blood hunting a little bit because I don't want to just to see whether I can get a few more. This is because Ys is opening up to me as a trade option to give them blood slaves for them to then transition over, because they have access to blood and earth and a bunch of useful cross paths, plus Forge of the Ancients, which boosts their forging ability. And we have a 5 blood slave income naturally from the sites and stuff that we've taken. So I figure a few level 0 blood hunters wouldn't go amiss, especially since I just can't feed all the slaves here, even with the bags that I'm bringing into position. I'm having trouble supporting this force. It's up to 600, a bit shy, 550 siege defense with a spare, spare 500 extra that we can bring into the walls once we're happy to starve. So if I think I'm going to be attacked, I can fall back and accept starving, because who cares if you have 2 morale and a bunch of diseases? If you're holding up the walls and you can't be assaulted, then no one can force you to run away and give up anyway. A bunch of, in Dominion's logic, a bunch of completely dejected, starving, diseased people can hold up a fort for, more than a year, for about a year, once they all have diseases and start losing 10% HP per turn. And that doesn't happen straight away anyway, because of the way supplies in fortresses work. So we'll be able to hold on for a bloody long time, especially once these walls go up to 1250 and give us a little more of a buffer. So hooray for that. What else happened? Search for magic sites. I will never stop searching for magic sites, even if I'm preparing a throne rush. I see no reason to. I think I'm proud of the fact that I'm very focused on site searching and do it a lot, so I'm going to keep doing it and see what I can find. What else? So series of battles, most of them were inconsequential. We defeated a raid from Ermor, which happens whenever he picks the wrong target. We then took a province from Ermor, only to be hit by a Relayan stack. Now, we had just slaves against like Meteorite Guard and Illithids. There was no chance, because these guys can life drain to keep themselves alive against unsupported Hartoon Runa, and Meteorite Guard at 19 protection are mostly immune to these guys, and they have decent stats to begin with, and they hit so hard they'll insta-kill, and they have better attack. It's just a bad time. So we killed absolutely nothing. The weakness of Hartoon Runa is sufficiently heavily armoured enemies. So that's a bounce. We lost that province to Relay. Look, I'm not going to do anything about this at all. It's a bounce. It's legitimate, and I really don't want Relay feeling like they need to enter into a conflict with me. So I'm not going to ask for compo or anything. I don't think I'm entitled to anything in any case. It's just a bump. And we'll go from there. Then Ermor pushed back TC slightly, and this is the south. Okay, so in the south, Ermor is now besieging Uruk here with their whole army. So they've marched all the way south, and I'm just doing the same thing as I've done before. We're closing up the gaps behind them, and we're sort of chasing them around with what has grown into a fully supported army with nature casting support, fire, with Army of Gold. So this is now Army of Gold, Firestorm, Serpent's Blessing. So this is now immune to all of his tricks, and we're just chasing him around. This is convenient, because if this army needs to bounce around down here, it can. If it needs to get back up here in time to fight Orm, it can. And it's justified being here and grouping up and getting larger, if any scouts are surviving watching, because it's chasing this army of Ermor. Meanwhile, so this is all grouped up. Some of it's in stealth, some of it's not. In particular, the Holy Three, because he's a throne rush element, and I don't want anyone to know that he is here. But for the moment, I'm moving him, not sneaking him, because I need the Divine Blessing in this battle. But after this, especially when I decide to move, I'm out of position. I'm like here, and I'm not on a lab, and I can't give him the Shade Mail. I want him to be wearing it so that he can then disappear and head off towards whatever throne he might have to claim. Unexpected events. We got some population, got some fire gems, Mound King, misfortune. We lost a province to independence, which we're retaking this turn, and then we killed scouts. We always kill scouts. They breached Uruk, so we're chasing him down this turn, so we won't lose Uruk. I don't really care if I do, to be honest. It's not relevant. And then a whole bunch of starving due to lack of supplies, but that's just because we're doing the usual thing we do, wherein we move, we start starving, then we move somewhere you're not starving. Everyone eats their fill and is then perfectly happy again. So we're just proceeding. You can see the movements that are happening are basically exactly the same as I've described before. This grand army of Nazca is now 837 units, is moving, but a lot of it is stealthy. In particular, hey, look, 180 condors. Is this triggering anybody? I mean, in the nicest possible way. Like there's a seraph with 180 condors, so that's fun. We've got 45 spires, and then I think a lot of chaff. And yeah, there's shit tons of chaff in here, along with some better sacreds. But the real punch is here. and that is sneaking into position this turn. Now, there's a supply usage of 120 on this entire force because of the amount of bags of wine. There's supplies here. I might juggle a few more bags in to make sure no one starves, but we're also sneaking out. So we've equipped... he's got a whole bunch of gems just in case we move mages up at the time that the battle starts with larger move rates than him. So, for example, Huron Priest with Boots of the Messenger or something like that. He's carrying gems that he can then hand off to them before they take fort. So he's taking his force of 99 Condors. He'll infiltrate to here because I don't expect there'll be any patrols here. And then I'm going to infiltrate him probably to Dunster as a good position to be able to move to wherever I need when battle commences. It'll also clear up some supplies from here. Other than that, we now have a laboratory in position. I'm not going to fort it. I think that would be too suspicious, and I think we have enough time anyway. But we're just moving everything down. You can see that there's a lot of supporting mages in position. This research core that has been built up here, they can just pull booster items and gems out of the lab at the last moment and move forward when needed. And similarly here, we can teleport this guy forward, and in the meantime, he can just call supplies. Now, we're calling some supply near the front, but the real summoning down here, I think there's 14, each summoning 3 per turn, so that's great. This is when Nazca has too much money, and I have too much money because I'm just big. I'm just really big. I'm making more than 40 Ghostly Sacreds a turn, and those Ghostly Sacreds now have incredibly high value because I can make them Protection 20. And because when they're Protection 20 while also being quickened and Fate Woven, they're just really, really good. I'm also training the regular Sun Guard Sacreds because they're going to come in handy. So I'm still recruiting them up to the limit of what the province can sustain, which isn't much because my scales are still trash, to be fair. Meanwhile, God's pumping out Forge staves of Elemental Mastery to boost up some additional casters that we require. We're expecting a Bloodstone from Yi soon, and that will allow us to finally start getting our Iron Walls up. I've got my casters in position, ready to do that. So I won't dwell. I'll just talk a little bit about what's going on down here. So my understanding is that so far Ulm is having a good time of it, that they've seen off challenges from 3 directions, that they're comprehensively beating the Vanirushians. You can see here they're besieging Wellred. I believe they've taken most of this territory here, that Machaca has sort of fallen back as a precaution to that. But eventually GC will put up his videos anyway, so you'll be able to see what is happening on that front, I expect there. I heard more about what's happening on the Vanirushian front, where Ulm has assured me and has shown me some images of his battles to show that he's winning, I believe to convince me to enter on his side or at least not to attack him. Anyway, that's the diplomatic situation. I'll let you know what happens next turn. We'll be back in turn 53 as we get pretty close to having everything on the start line. At the very least, most of our forces for this front will be in 50 that next turn. Then they just need to move to Light Hills, and once these guys move to Light Hills, we are officially at the start line and ready to go. Okay, it's turn 53 as Nazca in YetAgainUntoTheBreach, and most of our forces are now officially at their start line. We'll go through events, positioning, and what my plan is, but essentially what we're doing is I've decided we're not going yet because our allies aren't quite ready, and because there's a critical item that I have managed to commission that has been forged, which I'm expecting next turn, which I will be dishing out to endgame. We can discuss what the plan is for that super combatant there. So, events. We've got our Bloodstone from Yeast, so we'll be casting Iron Walls for the first time this turn, and we'll keep casting it every turn thereafter in descending order of importance around our thrones. Every throne that I have, I'm now comfortable with my ability to fortify. Everything will have several hundred siege defense, everything will have at least 1 dome, and the ones that are most at risk will have enough wall integrity. Teleport attacks are usually pretty bad at breaking walls, unless you bring lots and lots and lots of gate cleavers, and I think I have enough wall strength and wall defense combined to counter a pure gate cleaver strategy, but we'll see. Traded, and this was compensation. This was a very, very delayed trade. I paid Yeast a long time ago. This was for the fact that they essentially broke a binding trade by several turns. I didn't ask for this. They offered it, so credit to Ernie for that. We cast Lichcraft 4 more times, so you can see there's a nice park of liches that has been built up at this point. So we've got Alexander Suvorov, Magnus, Eugene was there before, Sun Tzu's there. We haven't renamed everyone, but yeah, we're building them up. Some of them are deploying to counter this Amorian attack here. Others are, creating even more liches, and they will really be my ace in the hole, not just against Ermor, but if Yeast decides to intervene to counter the Throne Rush maneuver, all of these guys can just dive underwater and start causing chaos, which will be lots of fun if we well, not fun that Yeast enters the war, but if we have to do it, it'll be fun to have a counter pre-baked in and ready for them, especially one that I don't think they have. Well, I haven't seen us use it. They might, clicking on us, know they're here, but there's so much crap in this province that they might not be getting accurate scouting reports, especially since we know that no scout survives here for very long at all. If it survives, we've got multiple groups of Hartoons patrolling, which is great. So we got that. Research Thaumaturgy 6. We're going to Evo 9. Evo 9 is a critical part of our timing push, and another reason why I've decided to wait. Next turn, I will have Evo 9, and once I have Evo 9, I have the amazing Flames from the Sky, and that's what I need. That'll allow me to essentially magnify the effect of this Alpha Strike with, fire raining from the sky and killing roughly half of people in the provinces we're targeting, because I don't think because no one has been hit with it yet, they'll probably have to go into the response cycle. Here the response cycle is get up domes if you can. I don't think they'll have the right casters in position to cast domes, and they certainly won't have thought to do it in advance. What else happened this turn? We found a really cool magic site. This is not strategically important, but it's cool, and a reason I continue site searching right to the end. 5 gems per turn. That might add up to 20, 25, 30 gems by the end of the game, even if everything goes perfectly. That's an amazing site, totally worth searching for. We didn't find any blood slaves. Ermor moved off Uruk onto Clon, so duped me by going back up north. That's fine. We'll do the usual thing. I'm not really going to bother chasing. I'm just shuffling this army at this point. We're going to secure Uruk and Andoria. If he moves to either of the fortresses, he'll die. We're also securing the throne, because that's the only thing I'm really concerned about. I don't want him to be able to successfully beat this. I want to keep this clear for as long as possible. It's also one of the reasons why I'm going to prioritize this area for casting relatively soon. So I'm bringing down mages from this army, see moving and patrolling, to be able to put up the domes and the walls, which we need. We cleared Uruk. There was a battle in Shem, which is just a raid. Yep, they raided us. I don't care anymore. The AI, the Kalian AI, brought out their Arzi for reasons, I don't know. Maybe just assessed incorrectly what the capacity of their Arzi was. Maybe they didn't expect us to move in this many slaves, but we just moved in lots and lots and lots of slaves. It cast Invulnerability. It started in its Great Warlock form. At this point, it's got Lost in Iron, Never Healing Wound. It's down to 6 hit points, but that doesn't matter. The real danger is the Arzi form, so we kill it. Okay, so now it's at 25 protection versus mundane attacks. There's 74 hit points to chew through. Go slaves. So it's casting Flame Breath, but you'll notice that with enough slaves, you might do a little bit of chip damage here and there. It's absolutely killing us. It's slaughtering us. Holy. Anyway, so we retreat. And they gain an Arzi, we lose some slaves. Now, the reason why I'm surprised that the Kalian AI did this is not because an Arzi can't beat 230, unsupported slaves, but because, how do you expect this story to end? So it's put its capital under siege with 1 Arzi. It can't break the fort. We're moving in bunch of and some supporting Supaya and some casters. The casters will get Army of Gold up that will make them virtually immune to the Arzi's attack. So in particular, the Fire Breath won't work anymore. And then we'll just chip it down. It's got no regen, so yeah, we'll take it out. Moving the last of our forces up to the start point. We're keeping endgame position 1 more turn for those items to come through. So let's talk about endgame and our plan for next turn, and what else is positioned, and then we'll roll on to turn 54. Okay, so endgame I've decided is going to be a center point caster. Why? So the key here is that we need to be able to take the throne turn 1. I think we will do that. We then need to be able to hold and breach successfully, and then if we hold and breach, then I think we've won, because we'll have enough siege defense in place, I believe, at that point to claim the throne. The only prerequisite is that we breach and take it while still having a in position capable of doing so. That's one of the reasons endgame is so good. How would they stop us doing that? They would stop us doing that by having Vortikai the Demi-Lich teleport onto us and maybe Wind of Deathing, maybe Wailing Winding us, maybe with an army or extra teleporter, some combination of that. And Endgame is immune to both of those. Endgame will not rout for morale, and Endgame, like, you can't Wind of Death this. It's magic, 19 magic resistance, and we will dial that up a little bit further. And even if you did, it's old age at 952, so it'll survive, I think, hundreds of turns of decay before eventually succumbing and taking HP damage. That's great. That's fine. So all that's important is that the Seraph survive. If you want to talk about army survivability under those circumstances, what you really need is an anti-magic caster and a buff caster who will survive any weird attempts and be able to protect the rest of the army from those sort of attacks. So the plan here is to boost Endgame up to horrifically high astral levels. At the moment we go into combat, make it really, really tanky, not super combatant tanky, but tanky, and then use it as a central caster. So what we're going to do is we're going to swap the boots of the messenger with the boots of like Callius the druid, which have a stupidly high reinvigoration value. We're going to sneak in, but when the time comes to reveal the Seraph, which will not be during the attack, it'll be the turn after. We'll do that by swapping the Shade Mail Hallbujin out with some other armor. We'll have one of the other mages carrying the banner which autocasts Light of the Northern Star. The Seraph is holding a crystal shield, which will take it to Astral 6. The banner will take it to Astral 7. Astral 7 will allow us to, and I think we're going to give it a crystal coin as well, which will take us up to Astral 8. And then we're going to time stop. We're going to time stop and then just cast all our buffs, running stupidly high reinvigoration, get Phoenix Pyre off towards the end. So we can get a whole bunch, we can get time stop, we can get anti-magic, Will of the Fates, we can get a whole bunch of spells up and out early for low fatigue costs, because this astral level will be sky high and it'll be reinvigorating at a really high rate, and there's very little chance the key is that we won't be dependent on this really fragile communion I have going on of just unarmored Hurons. If I'd thought of this, I've thought of a lot of things, but if I had thought more in advance, I probably would have gone to the expense of forging armor or commissioning armor for all the Hurons. I will probably hack together what I can. But the point is, this is very vulnerable. In particular, he could just magic duel my communion. He has Imperial Geomancers, who are really cheap Astral 1s. There's a whole bunch in position. We'll Flames from the Sky this before we move in to kill as many as possible, like up to half. Probably less than that because commanders get a bonus against it. But the point is, our communion is vulnerable. It's vulnerable to magic duel. It's vulnerable to every other remote attack trick in the book. Or they might just die. So, whereas you won't, this is a natural Astral 4. Less likely to be able to magic duel this guy successfully. It's still within range, but with the Hurons around to suck up the targeting, you're unlikely to get many magic duels on the Seraph anyway, and when you do, the Seraph is likely to win. A roll of 1 against a roll of 4, like bad news bears for the Imperial Geomancers, even if they're all scripted, and then there's a whole bunch of targets. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 valid targets, I think. And I'm bringing more in. 9. And I'm 9, 10. And I'm bringing more in every turn. So that tactic won't work against Endgame. Endgame will be able to stop time and get key buffs off, which makes sure the army is valuable and able to fight, and we're probably going to win if that happens. And then Endgame will sit inside the walls, King of the Ashes, and claim the throne while we have reinforcements falling in. I'm not sure what else I can say about this turn, other than we're broadly in position. You can see the number of units increases every turn. We've been forging a whole bunch of boosters. We're making an Amulet of Resilience. Amulet of Resilience is going to be one of the reinvigoration items. So I think we're going to go Amulet of Resilience, Boots, Crystal Coin, or we might swap out for a Ring of Regeneration, depending on whether I want to absolutely go all in on the casting and have like 20 reinvigoration, or whether I want regeneration as my protective measure. But I think with heaps and heaps of reinvigoration, Phoenix Pyre is going to be a sufficient protection, especially if the army has Army of Gold and won't be killed by him exploding in feats of friendly fire. So that's that. Not much to report so far as the war in the west goes, other than you can see that Ulm, whose start point was up here, has now conquered Welrid, and I think has carved out a salient. They're besieging Sleepy Volds, I believe, with overwhelming force. I believe there's been some significant losses of the Vanirushin army, i.e. they've lost their field army, I believe. And they've just carved out all of this territory here. They're sort of dueling with Machaca here, and are holding Ys off on the northwestern front. I believe that Ys has taken some losses as part of that process. So Ulm is looking like they're winning. They're winning this three-way fight, which is a credit to Mr. Root. It explains why GC has asked us to enter. I will decide very soon when I cancel my nap with Ulm, because this province looks like it's not forted. And I can only believe that that is bait, because I know there's significant reserve forces here, but that's very risky. That's a very risky move by Mr. Root. If he continues with this, it might just be that there's a stealthy commander. I know he has shade mails. He's been using them before. It could just be that there's a stealthy commander completing the fort, which would be a very Mr. Root move. But if there is no fort when we move in, we'll cast Wizard's Tower the turn we take it to provide us one turn of insulation against anyone who comes back, because even though there will be 0 wall strength and it will thus instantly crack, that still prevents the battle taking place that turn. And that gives us a little bit of protection. And if we have enough siege defense in and that we overwhelm them, we should be able to build the walls up faster than they can knock them down. I don't think that because of the way turns cycle and the way Wizard's Tower gets cast that they'll get to do that turn, so they'll have a chance to assault. But if they do not assault, I think we'll build the walls back up, or at the very least have a chance to respond. And with all my teleporters now dispersed and having dispersed Royal Malkeys all over the place, and getting my items forged and ready in this giant lab full of reserve items. There's my Banner of the Northern Star, which has been produced. I've got a bunch of fire boosters ready for the casters. I've got an elemental mastery staff, a couple of ritual staffs. That might be necessary to boost some of the casters up. That we're more or less ready to go. So I'm happy. As of next turn, we'll probably be issuing go orders, because our items will have arrived and Facia and Shinoyama are pretty much ready. And we'll go from there.